Alex Thompson stood in the quiet of his modest Seattle apartment, leaning against the kitchen counter. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft hum of the refrigerator. His eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. It was 7:30 a.m. Emily, his fiancée, was still in the bedroom. They had agreed to have breakfast together before she left for her first client meeting at her new job with a prestigious downtown marketing firm. "Emily, your coffee's getting cold," Alex called out, his voice laced with a faint edge of impatience. "Coming," her voice echoed from the other room. Moments later, Emily emerged, her blonde hair swept back into a sleek ponytail that accentuated her sharp features. Her blue eyes sparkled, their brilliance enhanced by the sunlight streaming through the window. She wore a crisp white blouse Alex hadn't seen before. The fabric was perfectly tailored, its pristine brightness contrasting with her warm tan complexion. She looked poised and professional, a picture of confidence and elegance. Alex couldn't help but smile as he handed her the coffee mug he had been cradling. Their fingers brushed briefly, a fleeting but tender moment of connection that reminded him of the intimacy they once shared so naturally. "Don't you look sharp today," he remarked warmly, his tone filled with genuine admiration. Emily accepted the mug with a soft smile. "Thanks. First client meeting today. Got to make a good impression." "You'll knock them dead," Alex said confidently, a hint of pride in his voice. They sat down at their small kitchen table, the sunlight spilling across the space, bathing it in a warm glow. Outside, the city's morning symphony unfolded. The distant wail of a siren, the steady hum of traffic, and the occasional chirp of a bird daring to explore the urban sprawl. "Any plans after work?" Alex asked casually, taking a sip of his coffee. Emily paused for just a fraction of a second before replying, "Oh, some of the team might grab drinks. Networking, you know." "Sounds fun," Alex said with a nod. "Just don't stay out too late. We've still got that movie marathon planned." "I wouldn't miss it," Emily promised, her smile lingering for a moment before fading. Alex noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes, but he pushed the thought aside. For 6 months, Alex had been Emily's biggest supporter, celebrating every milestone in her new job. They had been together for over a decade, their relationship beginning in high school and weathering every challenge life had thrown at them. But lately, Alex couldn't ignore the subtle shift in Emily's demeanor. She seemed more distant, her attention diverted. Her work hours grew longer, her excuses more frequent. She began staying out late, often citing work events or late-night meetings. On some occasions, she didn't come home at all, explaining the next morning that she had stayed at her sister Sarah's house to avoid the long commute. The growing distance gnawed at Alex, though he did his best to conceal his unease. One evening, as Alex tidied up the living room, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message from Jake, a friend from the gym. Asterisk, "Hey man, haven't seen you around lately. Been busy?" Asterisk. Alex typed a quick reply. "Might swing by tomorrow," after hitting send. His gaze drifted to a framed photo on the shelf. It was a picture of him and Emily at Cannon Beach, their arms wrapped around each other as the endless ocean stretched behind them. The memory of that day, of laughter and carefree moments, felt like a lifetime ago. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of keys jingling in the lock. Emily stepped through the door, her cheeks flushed, her energy subdued. "Hey!" Alex greeted her. "How was work?" "Long day," she replied with a sigh, kicking off her heels. "I think I'll head to bed early. Everything okay?" Alex asked, his concern evident. "Just tired," Emily murmured, offering a weak smile. "Client meetings are draining." Alex watched her retreat to the bedroom, the unease in his chest growing heavier. He tried to shake off the feeling, convincing himself it was just the stress of her demanding job. A few weeks later, over dinner, Emily mentioned an upcoming weekend trip with her coworkers. She explained it casually, as though it were nothing out of the ordinary. "We're heading to Ocean Shores for a team-building retreat," she said, brushing the topic aside as quickly as she brought it up. "That sounds exciting," Alex replied, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. Maybe we could plan our own trip soon. Definitely, Emily said with a quick nod before steering the conversation in another direction. When the weekend arrived, Alex helped Emily pack her suitcase. As he tossed a bottle of sunscreen into the bag, he teased, "Don't forget this. You'll thank me later." "Thanks, Mom," Emily quipped with a laugh, leaning in to peck his cheek. "Very funny," Alex chuckled. "Have fun. Call me if you need anything." The weekend passed quietly for Alex. He filled his time with household chores, caught up with old friends, and even attempted to cook a new recipe, a venture that ended in a comical disaster. Though he texted Emily a few times, her replies were short and sporadic, leaving him feeling disconnected. When Emily returned Sunday evening, her energy seemed off. She looked drained, her usual vibrancy dulled. "How was the retreat?" Alex asked, eager to hear about her weekend. "Productive," she answered curtly, offering no additional details. "I'm exhausted. Do you mind if we catch up tomorrow?" "Sure," Alex said softly, watching as she slipped into the bedroom without another word. That night, as he lay in bed, a familiar unease crept back in. Something wasn't right, but he didn't know how to address it without risking more distance between them. 2 nights later, as they cleared the dinner table, Emily hesitated before speaking. "Alex, we need to talk," she said, her voice quiet, her eyes avoiding his. A chill ran through him. "Okay," he replied cautiously. "I think we should take a break," she said, her tone soft but firm. Alex froze. "What? Where is this coming from? Is there someone else?" Emily shook her head after a moment's hesitation. "No, I need space to figure things out." Though devastated, Alex agreed to give her the space she asked for. Emily moved out temporarily, but after a few months and several counseling sessions, they decided to try again. Slowly, they began rebuilding their relationship, though trust was a fragile thread between them. One evening, Emily came home with unexpected news. "Guess what?" she said, her face alight with excitement. "What?" Alex asked, his curiosity piqued. "I'm pregnant." Joy washed over Alex as he pulled her into a hug, spinning her around the room. They had talked about starting a family, and the news filled him with hope. Despite the happiness, doubts lingered in Alex's mind. One night, he finally voiced his concerns. "Emily, would you be okay if we did a paternity test?" he asked cautiously. Emily froze, her expression stricken. "Why would you even ask that?" "With everything that's happened," Alex stammered, "it might help me feel more at ease." Tears filled Emily's eyes as she shook her head. "If you really loved me, you wouldn't need a test," she said before leaving the room. The next morning, the silence between them was deafening. Alex watched as Emily sipped her coffee, her gaze fixed on the window. The chasm between them had never felt wider, and Alex wondered if their relationship could survive the storm that loomed ahead. Alex knew he couldn't avoid the tension that hung between them after the events of the previous night. It pressed on him heavily, and as he took a deep breath, he began cautiously, "About last night." Before he could finish, Emily raised her hand, her face pale, her lips trembling. "We need to talk," she interrupted, her voice shaking. The seriousness in her tone made Alex's stomach drop. He braced himself, his mind racing through the possibilities of what she might say. Emily paused, struggling to find her words. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, and her gaze flickered everywhere but at him. Finally, she confessed in a whisper so faint that Alex almost didn't hear it. "I've been hiding something." He froze, his heart pounding as he waited for her to continue. She took a shaky breath, forcing the words out. I cheated on you." The words hit Alex like a physical blow, leaving him stunned and speechless. He stared at her, unable to process what she had just said. Seeing his silence, Emily pressed on, her voice cracking with emotion. "It happened during the beach trip. I met someone, Mark. It just happened. I'm so sorry." Her admission felt like a knife to his chest, but what came next twisted it even deeper. Emily hesitated, tears streaming down her face. "I think the baby might be his," she said, her voice breaking completely as if the weight of her own words crushed her. Alex stood abruptly, his legs unsteady beneath him, and began pacing the room. His mind was spinning with disbelief, anger, and pain. He stopped suddenly, his voice trembling with rage. "How could you do this?" he demanded. "How could you betray me like this?" Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks as she sobbed. "I don't have an excuse," she said, her voice shaking. "I was confused, and things between us weren't great. But it was a mistake. I swear." Alex's bitter laugh was harsh and devoid of humor. "A mistake," he echoed. "You lied to me, Emily. You made me believe we were rebuilding this relationship, and all along—" "I'm sorry," she interrupted, her voice barely audible through her sobs. "I'm so sorry." The pain was too much for Alex to bear. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door, needing space, needing air, needing to escape. "I need to get out of here," he said firmly, his voice sharp with finality. "Please don't go," Emily begged, desperation in her voice. "We can work through this. We can fix this." Alex turned to face her, his own tears threatening to fall. He shook his head, his voice breaking as he replied, "I don't see how." With that, he walked out the door, leaving her sobbing behind him. For days, Alex barely functioned. He moved back into his parents' house, retreating to the familiar safety of his childhood room. The betrayal weighed heavily on him, consuming his thoughts. Emily tried to reach out, calls, texts, even emails, but he ignored every attempt. He couldn't face her, couldn't bear to hear her voice or see her words. One afternoon, while Alex was sitting at the kitchen table, lost in thought, a knock at the door startled him. When he opened it, he found Emily standing there. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale and drawn. "Alex," she said, her voice cracking, "please talk to me." Reluctantly, Alex stepped outside, closing the door behind him. He crossed his arms and stood stiffly, keeping his distance. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone cold. Emily hesitated, her hands twisting nervously. "I've scheduled an appointment," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the ground. "For an abortion. I thought you should know." The statement caught Alex off guard. He stared at her, struggling to understand why she was telling him this. "Why are you telling me?" he finally asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Emily looked up, her eyes filled with pain. "Because I don't want to hide anything anymore," she said. "Mark doesn't want the baby, and I can't do this alone." For a long moment, Alex said nothing. Despite his anger, he couldn't ignore the flicker of compassion that stirred within him. Finally, he sighed and said, "I'll drive you." The drive to the clinic was suffocatingly silent. Neither of them spoke, the tension between them almost unbearable. After the procedure, Alex brought her back to their shared apartment. As they reached the door, Emily turned to him and said softly, "Thank you." He nodded, unsure how to respond. As he started to leave, she stopped him. "Can we talk inside?" she asked hesitantly. Alex hesitated, his instinct telling him to walk away, but something made him nod. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between them feeling like a chasm. Emily was the first to break the silence. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she began, her voice trembling. "But I want to try to make things right." Alex looked at her, his expression heavy with sadness. "Emily," he said slowly, "you broke my trust in the worst way. I don't know if I can forgive you. I need time." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand," she whispered. In the weeks that followed, Alex began the process of rebuilding his life. He returned to the apartment only to collect his belongings, carefully planning his visits to avoid seeing Emily. While packing, he stumbled upon a hidden stash of letters in her nightstand. Curiosity compelled him to read them, and what he found shattered him all over again. The letters detailed Emily's affair with Mark, their plans to run away together, and her doubts about staying with Alex. It became clear that Mark had rejected her only when he learned of the pregnancy. The betrayal felt unbearable. Without a second glance, Alex left his key on the counter and walked away from the apartment for good. Back at his parents' house, he made a final decision. It was time to sever all ties with Emily. He blocked her number, deleted their photos, and erased every trace of her from his life. Months passed, and slowly, Alex began rediscovering himself. He threw himself into his work, rekindled old hobbies like hiking and photography, and started volunteering at a local animal shelter. One day, while grabbing coffee at his favorite cafe, he accidentally bumped into a woman. They both apologized at the same time and laughed. Alex looked up and met her eyes, warm, hazel eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "I'm Lily," she introduced herself. "Alex," he replied with a smile. They talked for a while, discovering a shared love for the outdoors. "Maybe I'll see you on the trail sometime," she said as she left. "Looking forward to it," Alex replied, his smile widening. That evening, Alex sat on his balcony with his guitar, strumming a familiar tune. His phone buzzed with a message from Emily. Asterisk, "I heard about the volunteering. I'm glad you're doing well. Take care." Asterisk, Alex stared at the message for a moment before deleting it. He looked out at the city lights, breathing deeply. "To new beginnings," he whispered to himself. With that, he picked up his guitar again, letting the melody carry him forward into a brighter tomorrow.